Welcome back. Our guest today is Caitlyn Cerame from West Florida Regional Planning Council. Thanks for taking the time today. You know, you bring to the table information, and that's a breath of air. That's definitely nice to have. More importantly, it sounds like what your plans are simply to open up those petals of that flower, and let's take a hard look at what we've got, what we want, what's realistic, what's prudent, what we can afford.
Right.
Down the road, I would imagine we're going to be dependent upon city and county funding, maybe some grants, obviously the funds that the CRA collects. What time frame are you actually looking at this point? When you get together, for instance, on April the 13th, are you looking at 5 years, 10 years longer, or are you looking at something more immediate?
So the redevelopment plan can be active, I believe, for say 20 to 30 years. So it's a long range plan. And so the intent behind it is that we do not just identify specific projects, because if you do that, it's pretty narrow-minded. And then once you complete those projects, what do you look to the redevelopment plan for? So these strategies are supposed to be broad enough that you can apply them over, a 15, 30-year horizon, planning horizon. So it's to be that roadmap. And then when projects come about, then the CRA board, the intent is for them to look at these projects and compare them to their redevelopment plan and make sure that they are in line with those strategies. So that's why it's so important for people to contribute to these strategies, because basically projects are going to be reviewed and approved based upon, whether they're in alignment with those strategies and objectives. And so when we meet on April 13th, we will be identifying, what's short term, that we can start working on now. What are things maybe going to take, 5 years, and then what's really going to be like long range. And it's going to be a frank discussion about what's realistic, what's some things are not going to be doable because it is a small city, but there is a lot of potential as well. And sometimes there could be things that no one even really thought about, but hopefully they'll kind of come out of this working session, if you will. Where everyone, hopefully it'll kind of be just like a round table style where we'll go through all these strategies that have already been identified and kind of figure out what's a priority to everybody.
Well, obviously the CRA board itself can change. The complexion of that board, even more importantly, can change. Not just the individuals, but the thrust or the aims and goals can certainly change. Then obviously city council, county commission, those are based on elections, and so all of those can change. What better thing to have than that long range? You're probably not realistically going to stick to it, but it gives you a target, and it gives you, more importantly to me, something against which you can measure what you're doing. Somebody can say, well, nothing's going on, but without a criteria for that, there's no way to make that statement.
Right, so then, it's up to the board, but every so often you can do reviews and say, we're looking back at the plan, and are we sticking to it? And, are we doing projects that really meet the intent of our redevelopment plan? So that's important. And another thing is when we get together with the county and the city and the board is that, the city or the board has their redevelopment plan, but then the city and county, they have their own comprehensive plan and land development code that does touch upon some of the things that the redevelopment plan does. So the hope is to try to be consistent in that staff members of the city and county are kind of aware of what the CRA goals and objectives are when they're looking at projects as well. So it's not just a money thing, it's to be consistent amongst all plans, when we're talking about development in downtown.
Yeah, and when you go into it with that realistic point of view, I served on the EDC here for a period of time, and it's okay to go after those 200, 300 employee businesses, but realistically, if you go after the 5 and 6 and 8 employee businesses, those are more realistically achieved, and without the infrastructure that's going to be necessary when you have 100 of those new businesses, you're never going to get those big businesses anyway, because they're looking at education and recreation and all that goes into it. And so often we say that's what we want, and it's that plum, and it's not realistic. So hats off to you. I think that's one of the best things that I heard you say was the fact that you do dwell on what is realistic, what is achievable. It's sort of discouraging to meet and make plans and go through all these machinations and then not have something happen.
Right.
If you're realistic and if you have lots of little baby steps that then lead up to the bigger projects,
Right.
You say you've got one foot in economic development as well. Would you say that a part, or an integral part, certainly a large piece of the puzzle when you work with a CRA, is that attraction of new businesses as well as the removal of blight and the improvement of the general area?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that a business attraction, but then retention is a huge thing as well. And I think, there's been discussions about, what is realistic. We know that we're close to DOT, so do we kind of work on having the office and professional, so having buildings that can accommodate those kind of businesses, engineering firms, things like that. So you kind of have to respond to what's around you and be realistic. And I know that they want Chipley to be a place where people can, they have a job, it's a well-paying job, and that, when people decide where they're going to live, they are, like you said, they're going to look at the educational system, they're going to look at, what's around them, what parks are around, what shops are around, because they want, amenities too. So you really have to have a well-rounded approach, which I really think the CRA steering committee really brought to light.
We have argued since we've moved here that we are in the transportation center of this part of Northwest Florida. 77, 79, I-10, 90. You can get pretty much anywhere within an hour. Pensacola, Tallahassee, Panama City, Dothan. You can live here and yet still enjoy all the amenities of the world's most beautiful beaches without having to deal with that every single day, which we did for 30 years. So we moved away from it, but we didn't leave anything behind, because anytime we want it, we can go down there, again, without not having to deal with that traffic every day.
Right.
The last DOT traffic survey that I saw said that at certain times in the morning, I think it's a 2-hour window, all of the traffic going up 77 that went past Brickyard Road, north of Brickyard Road, turned right onto 90 to go to DOT. So information like that tells me that if you want to put a donut shop in, or if you want to put a coffee shop or a little place for breakfast, somewhere in that stretch is going to be a built-in traffic pattern.
Right.
And I know that some of that information is disseminated, but I think that we need a holistic approach.
Yeah.
And so that when somebody comes in, unfortunately, so often they go to the Chamber of Commerce or to someplace else and they're told, no, your businesses shouldn't come here. That's not a good idea. This happens. And they've come to us and going, this is the response we've gotten. They say, well, I don't know why that would be the case, but let's talk about what it is you want to do. So often we have blinders on and we're looking for that pie in the sky, when in reality that one little mom and pop business could be so much a fabric, and you never know who those people are going to be. If you get a couple of firebrands move into the community, all of a sudden people are more aware. You might make some people angry, but you're making something happen. Just like that grain of sand in the oyster makes the pearl. Sometimes you have to have that little bit of irritation, that little bit of change, but nobody likes change. Do you find that you're getting the same response here that you do in other places, or is there something unique or different about Chipley?
I've been really impressed. I think, dealing with the steering committee, they are really have, their finger on the pulse of what's going on and acknowledging certain changes. Like you said, along 77, some of those historic homes are now being converted to offices. So we just have to be able to anticipate things like that and knowing where things are headed. So in these sub areas that we created, they kind of said, all right, well, we know that, there's already this sort of trend that's happening. Where do we see things going, within the next 15, 30 years? So, they want to, build up certain areas like making a right on 90 there. They want it to be an attractive commercial corridor. So they talked about wayfaring signage. When you enter the city, like having these gateway treatments. So when you're in the city of Chipley that there's something telling you, and that you have certain beautification and landscaping that makes it attractive as you come into the city. So really they talked about so many things, and they talked about the future of businesses here and where they could be located. So it's very proactive and forward-thinking.
There has been some talk, as there has been for a number of years, but recently especially, about Amtrak cranking back up. the Sunset Limited making a stop here as it did at one time. Do you have any thoughts about the relative impact that something like that would have?
I couldn't say, with definitively what sort of impact that's going to have. I've heard that having the rail run through the city is a blessing, but also can cause a lot of issues as well. So when you try to have events going on, you have a loud railroad, train going through, but at the same time, it's kind of the heart and soul of the city at the same time. I mean, historically. And if you're trying to kind of take advantage of that unique history, the railroad is certainly a part of it. So, maybe there's opportunities with the depot park and everything like that, because there have been a lot of other communities that have utilized railroads in unique ways to kind of make it part of the built environment that people enjoy.
When we first relocated to this area and put our studio in downtown Chipley, we were on Railroad Avenue.
Okay.
So, the building shook.
You know all about it.
Yeah, and after a while, we didn't even hear it anymore.
Yeah.
We were in the Dunn building there for 7 years, and people would be in there, they'd be holding on to something. What is that? Oh, that's just a train.
Yeah.
The first year or two was right after when the bubble burst.
Okay.
And we had sometimes no trains in a day. Mm-hmm. And then we had 1 and 2 a day. Now we have, I would guess 10, 15 trains a day, and maybe that many at night as well.
Wow.
To me, that's a sign of...
That's a sign of money. I mean,
absolutely.
Absolutely. That's progress.
They're moving steel, they're moving cars, they're moving the National Guard. It doesn't matter what they're moving.
Yeah.
Something's moving. They don't run that train for free.
No, it's not cheap.
So, yeah, and the Bonifay obviously enjoys the same train presence that we have. They have a big rodeo parade. We have the watermelon parade. We have a lot of different parades. And many times there has been that 20-minute gap in the parade because, that the train comes through.
It has to go through.
It's the way it is.
Yeah.
In the late 70s, early 80s, when we lived in Bay County, there was a train derailment in Youngstown, chlorine. I think eight people died, including a deputy that showed up on the scene. So there's always inherent dangers with rail, and that's just part of the cost of doing business. Chipley was founded on the railroad.
Right.
And so you can't overlook your history there either. And I'm sure that some of those historical people would be very upset if people were angered at the train being here. But in reality, that's the only reason there was a town.
Right.
Probably a water stop initially or something like that. Where do we go from here? You're going to be meeting on the 13th for that super meeting. Hopefully all of these entities come together. What's beyond that? Obviously, there's going to be a consensus reached, and hopefully it's going to give some direction. There are going to be new tacks taken as far as expenditures of CRA monies. Forget all that. That's already gone by. What's after that? You're just in a maintenance holding position and offering advice as it's necessary?
Well, you really touched on something, which was consensus, which I'm really hoping comes out of the super committee meeting. Definitely some things that we can all agree on need to be, started on. We need to start working on these certain things. So what happens then is we have been documenting the steering committee meetings, the public workshops, the surveys, and then the super committee meeting for our project specifically. That all gets rolled into an updated redevelopment plan for the CRA. So they'll have kind of like a game plan or roadmap of these final strategies that they really need to focus on. We will also do a little bit of analysis on, demographics, population projections, things like that, that they can refer to, the CRA that is, when they're looking to do future projects. And we give that report to the CRA, and so it's really the CRA boards then, to do as they will with that redevelopment plan. Now, I know there's already been discussions. I mean, they want to keep the ball rolling. So, kind of right away, what is the grant funding available to kind of start doing like phase 2? So if we really identify that something's super important, whatever it may be, that comes out of the super committee meeting, we can already start, planning to apply for grant funding and stuff for that. So,
will that city council and county commissioners, will they still have input, or is this just a one-time thing where they're working, or do they have a sitting member that represents their interest as well? How will that go forward?
I don't know if they have a sitting member on the board, but
seems like they should.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure about that, but I think the hope is that this will really, there's been past coordination, but the hope is that this will continue to be, something that they are working on aggressively, is the hope. You said we have some new elected officials, so that this will really become a priority for everybody, because I don't think economic development is, I think that's everyone's focus to some degree. Maybe you come at it from a different approach, but at the end of the day, we all want, or it seems that the community here all wants their family and their grandchildren to keep on living here in Chipley. So you have to have job opportunities and a place where people enjoy to spend their time here, things to do. So those are the things that will hopefully come out of these strategies in this project.
Well, we don't have a franchise on it here. Anywhere in the country that I've lived has been the same way. I would rather have diverse opinions about what should be done with the end goal of actually doing something versus what we call the Ginnets. They're, again, anything that wants to be done. They're against anything. So, they just don't want change. Yeah. And I get that. We had it in Panama City Beach, the people that retire there, and they're on a 4-lane road, and they expect it to stay that way. Well, guess what? When spring break comes, and that new hotel or that new club, or, if you happen to be someplace close to La Villa or Spinnaker or some of the big, that's the way it is. And you went into it with your eyes open, and you expected things to stay, small, and that's not. And that's the reason we left, because in the 70s when we moved there, it was a nice little sleepy fishing village.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time today. I apologize I was late. That's something I pride myself on not doing, and I appreciate you being gracious about that. But more importantly, thanks for what you bring to the table. Thanks to West Florida Regional Planning Council. Look forward to having you back. At one time, if you recall, we had some discussions about you guys coming on semi-irregularly and just kind of giving us updates about various things. Please reconsider doing that. Now that you've been here one time, you know that maybe no blood is shed, and it's a relatively safe process. But at the very least, please plan on coming back after that April 13th super meeting, and then whatever time frames are appropriate, and letting us know, let our viewers know what's going on. I think that many times we presume nothing is happening when we don't hear anything.
Sure.
And there may be lots going on.
You just don't know about
If you don't tell people, there's nothing going on. And many times people are not elected back to an office, re-elected, because people presume they didn't do anything. And our message to all the candidates with whom we work is that you have to put that stuff out there. So please consider coming back.
We definitely will. We'd love the opportunity to come and the Planning Council to talk about other programs that we have that affect this area, but also, we'd be happy to come and talk about the outcomes of the super committee meeting. So, the public knows what exactly, if you couldn't make it, what happened, what came out of it, and contact information if you have any questions, you can always email me. I know that the board, the CRA board and everything, I know they're always open. If public have questions, transparency is a good thing. So, I think this is a great opportunity to promote the super committee meeting, and I appreciate you giving us the time to come on.
Well, you're welcome. As we talked in the pre-show, I know there's something on the calendar for us for April 13th.
Okay.
And no promises, but we will try to put a staff over there and maybe record some of that meeting.
Okay.
So that we can then let people know. So even if you don't make it, you can at least have some kind of idea of what went on. And again, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Our guest today has been Caitlyn Cerame from West Florida Regional Planning Council, talking about, in this case, the CRA, but more holistically, talking about Washington County. Chipley being the county seat and a very large part of the economic engine of the county and really this multi-county area. Hopefully Caitlyn's going to come back soon and let us know what progress is made. This is an exciting time. We've got a brand new sitting county commission. We've got a new sheriff in town, a new chief of police. For the first time in a while, everybody seems to be on the same page. We have business people in all of these relative positions. I think that's a very important thing for them to be number one, a businessman, and not just a politician, although the political part of it certainly has to be done. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll be right back.